Well, good evening. We are just giving everybody a minute to join. Welcome to our next episode of the Meet the Authors. We're so glad if you're joining us this evening live for the interview, or if you're watching this after the fact. Thank you so much for joining us. We will get started in just a minute. It looks like we have some people joining, so we'll go ahead and get started. Like I said, welcome. My name is Sarah Lynn Wells, and I'm the podcast administrator for Motherless Daughters Ministry. Before we get started with our interview, I wanted to just let you know a few things. One, in our comments in the chat, you can see a pinned comment. We would love if you'd like to sign up to be entered to win a copy of Mom's Gone, Now What, the book that we will be discussing tonight. There's a link to a form. This signs you up for Mershon's email list, and you can be entered to win a copy of her book. So I wanted to let you know that. Also, a few other things. Feel free to join in the chat and ask your questions. We would love to incorporate those into the interview as well, or just letting us know where you're listening from. We'd love to say hi, and we're so happy that you are able to join us for this conversation. This is our second in the Meet the Author series, and I know the first one we had some really good conversations, and it was great to just be able to learn a little more about the author and the book. I also wanted to just give a quick little information about the ministry in case anyone here is new to the ministry. Motherless Daughters Ministry is a faith-based organization, and we are dedicated to serving women who have lost the nurturing care of a mother. And what makes us unique is this could be loss, mother loss through death, could also be through loss of nurturing care, through emotional absence, or through narcissism. There's so many different ways that people can experience mother loss, and that is a goal of our ministry, is to help create a community for those women through support groups, through courses, our blog, our podcast, doing things like this where we're able to introduce you to authors and books that have been helpful to others as they travel this grief journey. So just wanted to give a little bit of information. You can always check out our Facebook page, which will give you links to our website where you can see our different offerings. And tonight, like I said, we are so happy to be able to do another one of our Meet the Authors. And tonight we are joined by Mershon Niesner. Thank you for being here with us tonight.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mershon is the author of Mom's Gone, Now What? She has a background as a certified life coach, child welfare social worker, and marketing communications entrepreneur, freelance writer, and author. And her first book, Mom's Gone, Now What? 10 Steps to Help Daughters Move Forward After Mother Loss. Mershon writes about losing her mother at 8 years old. In addition to her own experience, she interviewed over 50 motherless daughters and uses their stories to illustrate the 10 steps. Her mission is to help other women who've experienced loss move forward in a healthy way. So it's very much similar to what our mission is with our ministry and what I know a lot of you are looking for in community as well. So thank you again, Mershon, for joining us tonight.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Well, I thought we would just start. As I said, we mentioned your book and a little bit about your mother loss story in that bio there, but I would like to just start by asking you what inspired you to write about your mother loss journey?
Sure. Well, to write about it, I met a woman just actually, she was in the middle of my street and talking to somebody, and I went up to introduce myself. And 2 hours later, she convinced me, based on my background, I guess, that I should write a book and join an authors group and a critique group. I mean, her name is Virginia Reed. She's about 96 now. She's a powerful force of nature, and she just convinced me I should write a book. And immediately, the idea of writing about mother loss came to me. And I really think that finding Virginia and deciding to write about mother loss was I was just called to do that. It just seemed, I never considered anything else. So I feel like it was kind of a calling, actually. So that I got home. I was in Florida at the time. I had been there all winter. I went back to Illinois. That was in May. I went back to Illinois and started writing.
Wow. That's so
Yeah, just like
interesting how
that.
just a encounter with someone like that
That's
can
right.
really change things about your life and really inspire you. That's really neat.
That's right. She's a great lady, and I stay in touch with her. In fact,
Oh,
my latest book I dedicated to her. So,
oh,
yeah,
how
great
special.
lady. Yeah, yeah.
Well, one thing that's unique about your book, I know part of it is obviously about your own story, but you interviewed, I think it was 50 motherless
I
daughters for your
did.
book.
I
And I was
did.
just wondering how their stories kind of are incorporated along with yours in the book.
Ab- Absolutely. Well, to tell you a little more about the process, when the first manuscript that I wrote, I sent it to my editor, and she said, "Do you want this to be a memoir, or do you want this to be a self-help book?" And I said, "I want it to be a self-help book." And she said, "Well, then you need to go back to the drawing board, because what you have is a memoir." So, that's what led me to thinking about speaking to other women. And and then I actually did interview over 50 women. And of course, all of their stories are not in this book, although many are. But all of their stories impacted the storyline, so to speak. So all of their stories are incorporated in the information. And then as I interviewed daughters, and they came from all over. Some were people I knew, some were referrals from others, some I found online, just from all places, and all kinds of mother loss experiences. And as I spoke with them, this whole idea of 10 steps started to take form, because each one of them had an individual path, of course. And really, the most powerful part, though, of speaking with these daughters was that so many of them said, "I've never told my story to anyone before." And there were many tears, there was much laughter. It was a very powerful experience. And it was really motivating, because they were standing behind me, and I knew I had to get their stories out there. So, um, and I learned so much. I learned so much from them. So it was a great experience.
That's so interesting, for so many to say that was the first time they kind of shared their stories. I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
so important. We talk about that a lot in the ministry of sharing your story to help build community and help others feel less alone. But I know that's a very common thing sometimes. It's difficult to talk about and something maybe we don't always share with
it
others.
is. It is. And I had something about storytelling. Oh, I know. Hold on. I had a quote here that was from someone else. Um, and it's about storytelling, I believe, that tells about the power of just of simply sharing your story. And this was from Margaret Sanger, who's an American nurse and activist. And she said, "My mother memories that are closest to my heart are the small, gentle ones that I have carried over from the days of my childhood. They are not profound, but they have stayed with me through life. And when I am very old, they will still be near." And so that's a part of the power of holding your story and then subsequently sharing it with others. So,
Yeah, wow, that was a beautiful quote.
Yeah, isn't that lovely? Yeah. And I'm old. I'm at that old age. This is my year I turn 80. That really resonates with me more now even than it did 5 years ago. I wrote this book. I published it on my 75th birthday. So I wrote this book well, I wrote it more than 5 years ago. But um, but as you age, those memories and those little snippets, because for me, they're so few, but they become, really precious memories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, and I'm sure as you interviewed the circumstances of all those women's stories, I'm
Yeah.
sure there were so many different circumstances and differences in that, but I'm sure there were themes and things that you noticed that were similar with all their
Absolutely.
stories.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And everyone processes loss differently. And of course, some lost their mothers like I did at an early age. Some lost them very late, and they were, the daughter themselves was older because their mother, particularly if she died of Alzheimer's, she might have been in her 90s. So they might have been 70 or more. And some, like what you said about the ministry, about how not only do you welcome daughters of loss, physical loss, death, but you also welcome daughters that have had just emotional separation. And I have two stories like that too, because in fact, one of my very best friends, she came to me, her name is Judy, and she came to me and she said, well, my mother didn't die, but she was never really a part of my life. Even though she was there, she was never present. So for me, that was mother loss. And that was a powerful message for me personally, to see that, to see someone's experience. So her story is in there too. Yeah.
That's great. Then you can really reach people that have a variety of
That's
experiences
right. That's
then,
right.
but being
Yeah.
able to include that. Well, as you're talking about that and the importance of how you wanted to include their stories, and as you mentioned, getting feedback, oh, you need to start over if you're wanting it to go in a different direction. Could you talk maybe a little bit about your writing process for the book?
Well, that pretty much sums it up. I wrote a book and then I wrote another one.
Yeah.
So I wrote it was frustrating. So I wrote a book and then I literally, um, pulled out a lot of just my own storytelling. I wanted to have the essence of my story in there, here and there, but I didn't need all the details because I was going to include other stories. But my writing process in general is, and this was a little different because this is nonfiction, and I think nonfiction is quite different from fiction. And the books I've written subsequently are fiction, but I'm not a big planner. So it wasn't like, oh, I had 10 steps and now I have to go find people that match. No, I just found women and had the joy of interviewing them. And after I got all done, I looked at all that and then began to put it together. Now, I did a lot of research around mother loss, and in the back of my book, I detail all the books that I personally read and used. And then I also have another list of other suggested reading. So there's a lot of books. And by the way, I had a stack, yay, bigger than that, yay, bigger than the screen, of books that I had read. And I ended up, once again, I inadvertently met a young woman who was a hospice volunteer. And I was telling her that I had all these books, and for some reason they were in my car anyway. And she said, oh, she said, we could really use those at the hospice. So I said, here you go. So that's where all my books are. They're in a library at a hospice, but that's a great place for them. And if I need any of that again, I can go find them. But um, so it's a combination of my experience, other people's experience, and then, there's so many great books written about mother loss, of course. And then it's incorporating all that information. Yeah.
Wow, sounds like you've had a couple different, just in writing the book, a couple different encounters that were
I
really
did.
life-changing
I did.
for
It was,
people.
yeah, it was a meant to be sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I like how you said that you kind of did these interviews. You didn't have a plan and were just trying to work them into it, but really just wanted to hear stories, learn from others, and
Yeah,
kind of pull out from that. And I know there's like these 10 steps that you kind of go through. Was
right.
there a particular step or section of the book that was really challenging for you? I know sometimes certain parts of the story can be really challenging to relive or to talk about with others.
There was, and I didn't know it was going to be so challenging. And I'm trying to look and see exactly what the step is called. But uh, well, anyway, it talks about the dark side. And so, talking about the dark side of mother loss, as I call it, and also abandonment issues, those were the two pieces that I personally hadn't examined very much. And for me, I realized I didn't really do, by the way, I didn't really do work around mother loss until I was almost 45 years old. So, as a kid, I was born and raised in Nebraska. I was, it was in the era, the 50s. My mother died in 1954. It was the era you just pull yourself up by the bootstraps and move on. And fortunately, I had a fabulous dad, but it was just my dad and I, and we had no relatives. It was just us. So we just got on with life. And so I didn't process much. I didn't even grieve, for a long time. But then it kind of caught up with me when I was about 45 and going through a divorce. And I was in a group therapy. And that was and I turned 50 while I was in that group. And the person leading the group, who is a therapist, Barbara McCoy Getz, who, by the way, she's mentioned in the book, she's fabulous. And she did a croning ceremony for me, becoming a wise woman. Now, looking back, I'm like, 50, really? Maybe today, but anyway, I did it at 50. So now I look at 50, good grief, I have kids that are 50. So I look at 50 as being really young, but we did this, and she said, well, as a part of that ceremony, you're going to do some work around mother loss. So I wrote a letter to my mother. Um, I did. I did a lot of ceremonial things. One of my few memories is that there were pink carnations on her casket. So I incorporated pink carnations into the ceremony. So that was one of the first times as more of an adult that I really began to process my own mother loss feelings. But then when I wrote this book, I went deeper yet because now I'm even older and more experienced and hopefully wiser. And one of the things, my mother also was a daughter-in-law. So my mother's mother died when my mother was 2, and then my mother died when I was 8. So I'm the motherless daughter of a motherless daughter. And looking back over the kind of mother that I thought she was, my vague memories and some of those other things, I really realized that she didn't get mothering. I don't know how much I mean, I know she really loved me, but I don't know how much mothering I got because I don't think she got mothering. And that was really the dark, I call it the dark side because it's that, we want to think of everything as all rosy. And I want to think of, oh, my mother was wonderful and everything was perfect, but that's never true, never. And so that was kind of the dark side for me, sort of seeing that in some ways she hadn't matured either, and then the other side was understanding how my abandonment issues, which really they've impacted me my whole life and still do in some ways. Um, my unwillingness to confront, which is a part of abandonment issues. But I realized that, and it was particularly poignant in my first marriage, but I realized that a lot of that came from mother loss. You know, when you lose a mother at a young age, that feels like abandonment, and you don't call it that. And, you know, in my case, I didn't think about that for all those years. But looking back, I realized that was a piece that I carried with me that was out of the mother loss experience. So those were the two, and whatever, I can't remember what step those showed up in, but wherever they were, those were the two. Oh, I know. Abandonment, fears, and dark side, number 6. So that was the most difficult for me to really come to terms with that. But, you know, kind of having the courage to put your story out there is also, you know, tough. You have to really have the courage to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to dig into those harder parts like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And
But
it's
it
being vulnerable, you know, it's being willing to be vulnerable.
I think that's so important because I know we hear a lot from others too, and I experience this as well. Sometimes, even if people think that maybe they have grieved, a lot of times there's still a lot of things that are pushed down, and just the
Mhm.
circumstances around whatever happened don't always make it to where we are properly able to grieve. And sometimes it's years or decades later before we
Mhm.
actually really start to unpack some of those things
That's
and
right.
allow
That's right.
ourselves to feel even those negative parts that are so important to work through
That's
in
right.
the healing journey.
That's
So
right. Yep, for sure.
that's going to be encouraging and inspiring to others who read it to dig into those places as well, even
It's
though
a
it's not
it's a
fun to do.
Yeah, it's a journey, you know, it's just a journey like everything else. And I welcome the journey. I mean, I do.
Well, what would you say is maybe kind of on the flip side, a more most rewarding part of it? We talked about a little
Yeah,
bit some
yeah,
parts that were really tough to talk about, but what's something that
yeah.
you feel was rewarding in writing the book?
Well, of course, the rewarding piece is hopefully making a difference. And I have talked to people that so that I know that, you know, the book made a difference, has made a difference, and the interviews definitely made a difference because that that was very apparent right in the moment that made a difference, giving women an opportunity to share their stories in a positive, kind of non-judgmental way. So, so that was really a positive piece. Um, and then, you know, one of the motivators for me, and in this age of all these groups on Facebook, etc., as I saw comments in some of the motherless daughter groups where daughters were so devastated, you know, literally saying my life is over, you know. And I'm not judging that. I'm just saying it broke my heart. You know, it did. And it does. And I mean, I still see that. You know, I have nothing to live for. Um, all those kinds of things. And in some cases, this was not like, oh, she died 2 days ago. This might have been months, years, you know, later. And I just was, and continue to be just motivated to reach out to women that are so hopeless and maybe helpless and give them hope that their life can be joyful and fulfilling and wonderful, you know, despite this loss in their life. And by the way, we're all going to, if we live long enough, we're going to have more losses. So as we learn, if we have early mother loss, you know, it's an unfortunate thing, but you know, we learn from that to move on. I mean, each loss gives us, you know, more ways to deal with life. So, but I've always been motivated by that and hopefully you know, have been able to make a difference to them, bring some hope to them.
As you think about those women, are there certain themes that you're really hoping they take away from the book?
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, mostly, just having hope. And I wrote a little thing down because and I'm kind of skipping to your last question too, but if there's one message that I want to share, and that would be honor your mother by living life to the fullest and let her light shine through you. And so I think, it's about if we flip that coin, and I talk about this in the book, where it's not all about us, it's about them. It's about my mother's last words to my dad was that she wanted me to grow up to be a wonderful woman. That's very generic, you know. And so I interpreted that as an 8-year-old one way, and as a 20-year-old, as a 40. I've interpreted those words over the years in many different ways. But ultimately, I think I want, I want to live a life in a way that she's going to be proud of me, but also just to say, oh, she lived her life to the fullest, and I want, and I know my mother was um, a woman that was people adored. She really did have a light about her, and so I want that light to shine through me as well. So, yeah,
Beautiful.
yeah.
Is there a specific passage or moment in the book that you feel like kind of captures that essence of what you want them to pull out? I mean, I'm sure that is woven all throughout the book, but is there any kind of certain
Hmm.
passage or section that kind of comes to mind?
Well, what did where, I don't know where, yeah. There's probably, let me read a couple of things and this might answer your question. Um, One of them actually was that little statement that I read at the beginning about mother memories, but another one um, is, let me get to this one. This is towards the end of the book, but I think it's the now what part. As we take steps to move forward, let's remember that we aren't stepping away from our experience. We are taking it with us as we become the best of ourselves. And I'm going to say more, but that's what I think so many people fear. They're like, they're like almost afraid to move forward because they feel like they're abandoning their mother, or they feel guilty if they're happy, or guilty if they're, not in that mourning sort of mode. Um, but we are taking it with us to become the best of ourselves. We are stronger for our losses, braver for our sacrifices, and more loving in our empathy. And I do believe that loss in general certainly makes us more empathetic towards others, for sure. We are the daughters of mother loss with the potential to be strong, caring, resilient, mature, independent, empathetic women who never give up. And this is what I want for my readers. And so, I think that's a lot of the power of being a motherless daughter, so to speak, you know.
I love that because it can feel so heavy when you're in those moments of grief, whether it's when it first happens or when you're kind of unpacking that later. But what you can grow and learn and be able to help others.
Yeah.
I love that image that you have at the end of what we have the capacity to be if we keep working on
Exactly.
that journey. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Sure.
great.
Sure. And just one little caveat, and this may be part of a question you're going to ask me, but um, one caveat to so much of this is, what is the daughter's experience and what is her life like immediately following? So if she's young, what was her father like? What was her, if she had a mother substitute of some kind or a caregiver of some kind? If she was older, what it was her support system, her husband, or her even her family or children or whoever it might be. And to me, that's part, that is kind of a caveat because for those daughters who had a very bad experience after mother loss, that can be more impacting in the long run than the mother loss itself. And that took a lot for me to learn that because I had a very good experience. As I said, I had a fabulous dad. Anybody that knows me knows all about my dad because I talk about him a lot. I mean, he died at 92. He's been gone a long time now, but he was a great dad, and I was very, very fortunate. But I learned that that is rare, actually. And so, in fact, I was in a motherless daughters group that was like a therapy group, but just about mother loss, short term. And we all kind of told our stories. And the other daughters had a very negative sort of attitude towards me. And I'm like, what's going on here? I mean, usually I'm pretty well liked, you know? I'm like, what's happening here? Well, finally it came out. They were literally mad that I had had this great dad. They were jealous of that, but it made them angry too. So, and then I talked, I had an interview, really one of my best friends, who her mother lost journey was that everything was a secret. It was a secret that she was sick for many years. She had a certain type of dementia, but at a very young age, and she was institutionalized, but it was a secret. Her whole, for years, from the time she was about 9 until her mother died when she was 15. And then even after that, there was all this secrecy. And she said it wasn't my mother dying that impacted my life. It was the secrecy that impacted my life. So, and so I think that's the caveat in a lot of ways because those of us who have had good support along the way, at whatever age that might be, that makes a difference as well. Because that's another working through thing that we have
Right.
to do, you know.
Right. It just builds a layer upon a
Exactly.
layer of that story.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. And I'm sure it also affects if you're able to actually grieve when it happens.
That's true
No.
too. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
was 30 when my mother passed away, but I had just become a mother myself. I had a
Mhm.
4-month-old. So that definitely had an impact on
Sure.
the amount of time and focus I had on myself and just kind of focusing more
Mhm.
on having a baby and learning how to be a mom. That can kind
Of
of affect,
course. Of
um,
course. Yeah.
delay being able to focus on my own grief and my feelings. And, so there's so many different versions of stories out there of how that can affect whatever your circumstance is at the time. It's a
That's
really
right. And
important point to
even
make.
and even now as a young mother, you don't exactly have the time,
Right.
to really focus on yourself and your own feelings and all that too. I mean, it may be, and I think, in some ways that's been true of me too. So somewhere up the road, you may have a whole nother step
Yes.
that you haven't yet taken. Who knows? But
Yeah.
I know it's a very busy time. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So yeah, but that's an important thing to think about too, how different everyone's stories are. And that's really
Oh,
interesting,
yeah.
the experience you had with others kind of being angry or having some resentment
Yeah.
about what your situation was, because we
Yeah.
all have different things that are difficult about our stories for us.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Well, and it was the first time, I mean, and I was 45, I think, when I had this experience. And it was the first time that I thought about it. It was the first time that I mean, I knew I had a good dad. My friends all liked, I mean, but I took it all for granted. And it was really the first time in my life, and I'm like, good grief, it was a game changer, and I didn't ever think about it like that ever. I just thought, oh, I had a good dad, and that was
Yeah.
that. But I never realized how that one fact really impacted my life going forward. Yeah, and still does. Yeah.
Well, I know you kind of mentioned that you have heard some feedback from people. So I was wondering if there was just any feedback from readers that maybe you've connected with. Maybe it's people you already knew, or maybe someone reached
Hmm.
out that you didn't know before that's kind of
Hmm.
impacted you, or they've talked about how your book has impacted them.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, yeah, I mean, I can't really give you any specifics, but I have had people, mostly it's about, oh, I didn't think about that,
Yeah.
and that's how I was when I wrote the book, so I can imagine.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, I never considered how, adding creativity to my life might make a difference in this journey, or, oh, I never thought about how important telling my story was, or some of these other steps, or even realizing how important it is just self-care, good self-care, and how important that is in the journey. All these different steps. Oh, and I think one of the things that was has been mentioned to me the most maybe is around the anniversary year, so that when you turn the age, assuming that your mother was on the younger side, but when you turn the age of your mother when she died, now that could be, a range, but how that was, as I interviewed women, that was almost universally true, that something happened. That was an impactful day or year or month, whatever it might have been in their life. And well, I have a very significant story about that, but others do too. I mean, one woman I interviewed, she literally thought she was having, I think, a heart attack or a stroke or something, literally the day of the exact time when she turned the age her mother was when she died. And it turned out it was a sinus infection. But, I mean, it can be a very impactful time. And I think it can catch us off guard. So that was one of the things that people that have read my book, and people that I've talked to, because I've done a lot of Zoom programs like this. And so, because I published in the height of COVID. So anyway, we did a lot of this, but that whole concept of the anniversary year was significant. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
I've definitely heard that as well. That, or when for women who are motherless daughters who become mothers, their children reach the age they were when they lost their mother, because they didn't really have
Yeah.
the role of what that relationship looks like past that point. So I've
Yeah.
heard both those years can be when things really hit them.
Yeah, because then they say, "Oh, I don't know how to do it from here."
Yeah, because you didn't
Yes, you
have that.
do. You'll figure it out. It's okay.
Yeah.
But, well, and for me, my mother was 34, her mother was in her 30s,
Mhm.
and they were both named Winifred. And my oldest daughter is Winifred. We call her Winnie, and
Oh,
my mother was called Winnie. So and I didn't consider this legacy when I named her. I just, when my husband and I named her. But anyway, I was really glad to see her get out of her 30s,
yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And it wasn't like something that I thought about all the time. I wasn't anxious about it, but I was vaguely aware.
Mhm.
And I now she's 55. Let's see. She's going to be 55. Is that right? I think so. Yeah, she's going to be 55. Anyway, but when she turned 40, I said something to her. I said, and I didn't say anything before because I didn't want her to get into the anxiety of this. And which she probably wouldn't. She's a social worker. But anyway, but she's pretty well grounded. But I did say, "Oh, I'm really glad to see you out of your 30s." So there's all these little things, these little catches. I call them. They're kind of like, how you catch a sweater on something. It's like that. Life catches. Yeah.
Well, and our body can, it's like they're recognizing things that maybe we're not prominently thinking. Like you said, they
Yeah.
were starting, someone you talked to was starting to experience these symptoms and not even thinking about this is the
Yeah.
year, those
Yeah.
things. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
I know we talked about this a little bit, but in the people that you interviewed sharing their stories and you writing this, what role do you think storytelling plays in the healing process? I mean, like I said, I know we touched on it a little, but do you think
Yeah.
that that is an important part of the healing process?
I do. I mean, well, I'm an author, so I'm a big believer in storytelling, but long before I was an author, I've only been an author for 5 years. So, long before I was an author, I've been my dad was a great storyteller. So I've been a believer in storytelling and sort of the power and the joy of stories, but not only around mother loss. And I think that is particularly powerful. And it needs to be someone, though, that you can trust. It needs to be someone that you can feel safe, really safe with. I mean, it's not a random choice in terms of who you tell your story to. And in fact, I think that's why I was able to really get serious about my journey was because I was in this therapy group with a phenomenal leader who I felt 100% safe with. So that's when I really could begin to unravel. But I think it's also, I mean, I've also had a husband who literally dropped dead of a heart attack at the age of 53. And I think telling my story, talking about him, talking about our life, talking about his death. Um, you know, and I when I have a lot of my friends now are widows. I mean, I'm going to be 80, so a lot of them are widows. And if I knew their husbands, I say, "Oh, remember when we did this?" Or I bring up stories that incorporate this person who's now gone. And people are often afraid to do that, but in the storytelling, there's real healing, I believe. And I found that to be true. And people have said to me, "Oh, I'm so glad that you bring up so and so's name or bring up one of those stories because so many people don't. They feel like it's going to upset me. That's what people say. It feels like they're going to upset me, where it's really quite the opposite generally. Now, nothing's universal, but
Right.
so
No,
that's to me, that's about storytelling. Yeah.
yeah, I think that makes them feel like their loved ones remembered and that they
Yeah.
live on through
Yeah.
their stories, through the memories. I think that, like you said, maybe not for everyone, but a lot of people, I think that that is healing and helpful for them.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I know you mentioned you have a couple other books as well, and I know the next two books that you wrote are fiction books, but I was wondering if there was still some of your story that you kind of woven in through those stories, or is that strictly just fiction, or did you kind of use an approach of still kind of telling some of your story through it?
Good question. Well, first, my next book after this one it's called The Bootmaker's Wife, and it was inspired by my great grandparents who were Nebraska pioneers. And so it continues in some ways, the family, the saga of family. The thread that runs through, and I'll tell you a little more about that in a minute and what was after that and what I'm working on now. But the thread that runs through everything I do, whether it's books or just my life in general, is I've always been an advocate for women and an advocate really about lifting women up and also the power of friendship and the power of community. And thank goodness for communities like yours, for daughters, because I'm just such a believer in that. So my back to the bootmaker's wife, there's really strong women figures in that book. And also it shows the importance of community on the prairie, at a time when, rugged individualism was sort of the name of the game when you think of the cowboys or you think of the sod busters, but in reality, they really needed each other and they depended on each other. And women, most particularly, a friend was a precious, really a precious commodity, so to speak. So that theme goes throughout The Bootmaker's Wife. And then I wrote the prequel to that, which is kind of weird, but it ended with a very interesting little old lady who lived in a dugout. Her name is Angie the Bee Lady, and I was really wondering about her, and she was fictional. So I wrote a whole book about her.
Oh,
So that was, and that's also a Nebraska pioneer story, but very different. But once again, it's about um, well, especially Angie being just determined and powerful, and nothing gets her down. She just powers through her life. And it begins with her being lost from a wagon train at 10 years old. And I probably picked an age, around there because she lost her whole family then. I lost my mother then, and how she survived going forward. So that's the thread. And then the one I'm going to be publishing in the next few months is called It's Mostly Good to Be Martha. And it's a story about a 89-year-old turning 90 who's in assisted living. But once again, she's a powerful woman that still is filled with joy, still has a lot of spunk. So the thread goes on. Yeah, yeah,
I love that. I love the focusing on those same narratives, like you said, that are in your book as well, and
yeah. It's just in
having
my
those,
life.
yeah, having those stories of powerful women that's important who are facing adversity and working
Right.
through that. And yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Did you find the process of writing fiction to be very different, or having those similar threads? Was there a similarity in the process of writing that?
Yeah, good question. Well, it's very, very different. And nonfiction, because I had been a writer of some sort most of my life. I wrote adoptive studies when I was a social worker. I wrote scripts and newsletters and brochures when I was in the marketing business. But so nonfiction was, similar in that you do research and then you write, that kind of thing. And of course, historical fiction, you do a lot of research too, but then there's the whole thing that just has to come out of your head, which isn't true of nonfiction, of course. So that was very different, but it was fun. It was a new growth experience. And then the contemporary fiction, and I'm writing my second Martha book right now, but the contemporary fiction has been even more fun because it doesn't require as much research, etc. And it's been really a fun projects. Yeah. So it's all good. I do it for the joy of it. I do it to bring other people joy. I do it to make a difference. So it's not work. It really isn't. It's hard work, but it doesn't feel like work. You know what I mean?
Yeah, when you're enjoying it, yeah, you feel
Exactly.
passionate about it. Well,
Exactly.
I have a couple other things, but I'm just looking in the comments now and I do see a question. And I
Oh,
also
good.
just a good opportunity to remind anyone that's watching, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments. But one person asked if you self-published or did a publisher pick up your book?
Yes. Well, Mom's Gone Now What? I was really determined to traditionally publish. And I went to a writers' conference, had some leads on agents, and was really, really determined. And had already started querying and doing all the work that it takes to do that. And then COVID hit. And this sounds morbid. I didn't think of it in a morbid way, but I said to myself, I don't want to die with this book in my computer. I just had such a feeling of responsibility to these women that I had interviewed. That was mostly what I felt. And I just felt like I had to get it out there, before something happened. And, that sounds far-fetched today, but if you remember back, and, I was 75, and, older people were just dropping like flies in those. I mean, they really, a lot of elderly people died in that epidemic. So I decided to self-publish mostly for that reason. I might have pursued it longer. And then I was really happy with the process. I was happy with the outcome, etc. So then the next two books I also self-published. And I have a team. I have editors, I have proofreaders, I have a designer. So yeah. And it reminds me, before we end, I want to say a couple words about the cover too of
Oh,
this book.
definitely. Well, if you want to go ahead, that'd be a great time
Okay,
if
well,
you
I
wanted to
hope
do.
that answers her question. Yeah, so the answer is self-published. Would I like to be published by one of the big five? Of course, but I'm getting to the age that I don't have time. I mean, it could take me a year to get an agent. It could take that agent a year to get a publisher, and it could take them a year or two to actually get the book. I mean, these are realistic numbers to get the book out there. Well, I just don't have that kind of time, to do that. And it's important once I write a book, it's important for me to get it out there. So anyway, the cover well, you can't see it because I have my filter on to blur out my bed. But anyway, the cover, if anyone has the book, um, there's pictures of women on the cover, and those are all mothers of daughters I interviewed. They're actual photographs. And the picture in the upper left-hand corner is my mother shortly before she died. It was the last formal photograph of her. And then the picture at the bottom right is my mother as a little girl, probably just 3, right after her mother died, and she's sitting on her dad, my grandfather's lap. And then the others are, one of them is this beautiful, beautiful woman who had early onset Alzheimer's and died very young, leaving 2 teenage girls who I spoke to, and one of them I really got to know very well. Um, and then one of them is the mother who died of later onset Alzheimer's, but she had a very interesting life. And then the group picture, there's a little girl who's Asian with an Asian woman and then another woman. And at the end of my book, I tell a whole story of 2 sisters who had this miraculous, really miraculous experience in China. And it's a mother loss, both of them, 2 different mothers lost. It's a mother loss experience, but their whole lives it's really a miraculous level. And I thought it was a good way to end because their stories really talk about the never give up, no matter what. Just never give up. And so that's their picture as little girls, and that was I think that was before they came to this country. They ended up, they're American citizens and they're elderly women now, but it's their stories from the time they were little babies. So, and they were abandoned during the war. So anyway, so that's the cover. So for those of you, if anyone sees the book or gets the book, and it doesn't, I don't think anywhere does it tell about the cover, but just know that those are all beloved, beloved uh, mothers.
That's such a special touch for
Yeah,
you and for the other women that are represented on the
yeah,
book
I
cover.
know.
Yeah. Well, I know you mentioned you have a book coming out, the 3 books that you do have. Where are ways if someone's watching this that they could connect with you? I know we can share the link to your book. And just a reminder, we also still have, you can still sign up to win a copy of the book. But are there other places that they can follow you or see updates about your work?
Sure, thanks. Well, I have a blog, and I suppose you can reach me through a blog, but it's motherloss.blog. So that, and I've gotten less active in that. In the beginning, it's been around for a long time. It's been around for 6 years or more. So there are a lot of posts. So almost any thing involving mother loss or any topic involving loss in general, and then some that have nothing to do with either. There's a lot of information, and they're very short, but a lot of information on that blog. And they're welcome to become, if they push the button to become a follower or whatever, then they will get a blog, notice every time I blog. So there's that. Um, and I'm happy for you to post my email address. That's fine. It's my name right there on the screen, my name at gmail.com. And if someone wants a personalized book for any reason, like if you want this, particularly this book on mother loss, a lot of people have bought this book to give away to friends who've had loss, or sometimes it's mothers that give it to their daughters sort of in anticipation of, someday they're going to be, a motherless daughter. But anyway, if you want it personalized, I'm happy to do that. Just email me. I charge the same amount as Amazon, and I give free shipping. Everything's the same as Amazon. And so I'm happy to do that and personalize it for you and send it to you. Of course, Amazon, Goodreads. If you're local, which I don't think anybody is, but if you happen to live in Southwest Florida, you can get it at the local bookstores and library. And there are other libraries around too. So those are the main places. Yeah.
Great. Well, we can put some of the links to that in the comments after
Yeah.
this, so that they can see that. And that's a beautiful thing that you could do for someone to have a personalized book like that. I know I've
Yeah.
had people who haven't experienced mother loss themselves, but have a friend who goes through it who will come to me and say, "What should I do for them? I want to do something
Yes.
meaningful, different than just sending, I mean, which is wonderful too, to send flowers or something like that. But
Mhm.
they will ask me, what's something that helped you? And so I think having a book or something like that that you could recommend
Yeah.
someone give to
Yeah.
someone, especially like further down the road, not when it first happens, but maybe
Right.
the way to kind of keep trying to support them even
Exactly.
later is
Exactly.
important.
Well, and I've had people, in fact, there's a review on Amazon that says, "Oh, I bought this book, but I held on to it for a long time. I just wasn't ready yet.
Yeah.
But they held on to it, and then they kind of gradually worked their way in and then finished it, and we're glad they did. But so I get what you're saying. Yeah. So that's certainly one way. And just another word on the email address. If anyone would like to get a monthly newsletter, now it doesn't address mother loss. I can't remember my tagline. It's something like, it's just to brighten your day. It's just a newsletter to brighten your day. It's very short. It's about less than a 5-minute read, probably a 3-minute read if you're fast. It usually has a book suggestion. Sometimes it has something about food. Sometimes it has information about what I'm doing next in terms of writing. But anyway, if anyone wants to get my newsletter, Musings from Mershon, they can just email me and then they will get that. And it's just once a month.
Well, great. That sounds like a positive, uplifting
It is.
me up to get in your
It's
email.
fun.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to everyone that's been watching and or that will be watching later. I just think it's really important to have these conversations, hear other people's stories and how they're able to use their stories to help others. So thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, have a good evening, everyone.